Excited to be here to talk about our Visualizing Loss project. I'm Jessie Burke. I am Vice Dean at the School of Public Health, and I have a faculty appointment in the Department of Behavioral and Community Health Sciences, and I was PI, or Principal Investigator, for this project. I do nothing by myself, and I'm really excited that I do lots of work with Sara Baumann. So Sara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I am Sara Baumann. I'm an assistant professor also in the Department of Behavioral and Community Health Sciences at the University of Pittsburgh. I am very fortunate to be a part of this project. I work closely with Jessie on many things related to arts and health, and I was the co-investigator on this project. And I come to this project with a background in filmmaking, so very passionate about the role of film and how we can use that in public health.
Yeah, and which is great because I know little about how to make films, but I certainly love the intersection of art and health and how can we use it for public health and in particular for research. And so it's exciting to talk a bit more about this project.
Yeah, speaking of this project, Visualizing Loss, it has a very catchy name, but Jessie, can you tell us a little bit more about what the project's all about?
Sure. So it is, I can tell a little bit of the history of how we came to the project too, I think is helpful. That, we were working together using a research method called collaborative filmmaking, and I'll ask you to introduce that in a second. But essentially using film to better understand stigmatized or less discussed topics. And we were, it was the height of COVID. We were sort of at home. We were thinking about what is it to be in the hospital? What is it to experience, a loss as we were thinking about the number of people who were dying from COVID. And, could we use film in some way to explore that and to really uncover it? And in discussions with some of our colleagues, we were saying, okay, well, we could use collaborative filmmaking in this space in end-of-life discussions. And that's how we ended up talking to the McElhattan Foundation, who funded this project. So it was very organic that we were just sort of thinking about some ideas, applications of the method. Could it be around end of life? And through discussions with the local foundation that funds work in this space, we landed on the issue of pediatric palliative care. And could we use collaborative filmmaking to explore the experiences of parents and grief following and bereavement following the death of a child from a life-limiting disease. And so not a topic that I know anything about. Sara, it's not a topic I know that you were working in at all. But through discussions, it became clear that it is a space where people don't talk about those experiences. They're very hidden. And could we use film to learn a bit more about the grief process and visualizing loss? And then could we use those to elevate and raise awareness about palliative care, how useful it is, what it really does, and encourage supports for it, in particular for pediatric palliative care. And that's where we ended up partnering with the Pediatric Palliative Care Coalition to do this project. And so Sara and I are going to talk today more about the method side of everything. But really, this project is truly a partnered project in that we did it with pediatric palliative care, and then we had an advisory board, and the partners and participants in the project were really critical to it all. So that's the topic and how we landed there. Super random, but very important. And once we committed to it, I think we were all in. And so maybe, Sara, you could tell us a little bit about what is collaborative filmmaking. It sounds like, oh, sure, let's just use film and try and understand these things. But what is the method, and how did we, sort of come up with it in the first place?
Yeah, so collaborative filmmaking is actually a research method that comes out of Pitt Public Health. It was actually developed by Jessie and myself during my PhD dissertation here at Pitt. We both are passionate about the arts and visual methods, and I had a background in film, so we thought, why not try to really come up with a systematic way to incorporate film into the research process, but also even beyond that, into how we disseminate research findings. And so that journey in itself has been incredible. And I would encourage you to go to our resources section on our website to see the papers that we've written kind of in more detail about the method. We developed a handbook and a very systematic process. So what is critical to collaborative filmmaking, or what makes it unique, is that the participants are involved at every single step of the filmmaking process. So we hold a training for participants. They come in with ideas, they generate storyboards, they share with each other. There's a lot of opportunity for exchange and practice. And then they go out into their own communities and make their own films. So Jesse and I are not involved at that stage. We really kind of let them go, and they have the opportunity and the resources, and they can always call us. But really, it's meant to be a space where they have full control over their films. So they go out and create films on the topic of interest for the particular project. And then we come back together with the participants to hold what we call co-analysis sessions. And in these sessions, we sit down with each individual filmmaker and watch their films and unpack all of the key messages, motifs, actions, dialogue. We really try to add to the richness of our understanding through those films. So they're involved in this analysis process. We do that both individually as well as a group. So the group session is also really fun because the participants get to see what each other created through the process and provide feedback, right? Like, oh, that experience is extremely different from what I experienced, or, oh, that totally resonates. And so we tried to understand kind of the group dynamic and the group consensus in that space as well. And then the final step in collaborative filmmaking is to, again, partner with the participants to share the films back out into the community. So that looks different for every single project because it really is driven by the topic and the need and where the films need to be screened. But that's a critical part, that the participants have the opportunity, if they wish, to share their films publicly, to raise awareness, to advocate for change. So that's a really powerful part. So participants are involved at all stages of this process. So that's a little bit about collaborative filmmaking. I don't know, Jesse, if you want me to go into more detail about how we used it for this project.
Or maybe just talk about, like, because I think on the website we have lots of resources and sort of more information about the specifics for this project, but like, why did we use it here? Like, why did we think that it would be valuable to use this method for this topic?
That's a great question, right? Because I think initially someone kind of looking at this project from the outside might say, that how does that work? Like, how do you get people to talk about grief on film and then share that publicly? Like, what is that? And I think we went back and forth a lot with our advisory board too. Like, is this the right method? Is this the right approach to unpack these really complex experiences? And what we found actually through this process was that these families, at least, the small sample of families that we worked with, were really excited to have a space to actually process and work through and share their experiences, because, like you had said before, Jesse, that it is so hidden. A lot of times these families had been hiding their own emotions, they've been hiding their experiences, didn't want to burden other people. And this really, what we found was a space where the families we could hold space for the families to share their experiences in a creative way, whatever way made sense to them. So I think for us, this idea of the power of film, the power of visuals, even the power of sound and music, which we can maybe get into a little bit, like all of those elements, I think, help to humanize this experience, right? One that's so hidden. And right, it was a pilot. We didn't know if it was going to work. I think thankfully we had really good advisory board members who guided us through this very complex decision to use collaborative filmmaking in this way. But I don't know, Jesse, do you want to say anything about the therapeutic piece as well?
Oh, geez. Yeah, there's so much to say about it, right? I think at least I personally, when we started the project, I believed that it was a good idea, that we could learn more, that it was clear that this was a space where we had an opportunity to elevate the voices of parents who have lost a child, to really say, okay, what are their needs? And I believed in that piece, but I don't know that I really had a true understanding of the breadth of what it would become, right? That, so you were just alluding to it, but that, collaborative filmmaking can also be therapeutic, or it can be an intervention, that through this process of engaging with film and creating something, that you can process your emotions, you can feel empowered, you can feel a sense of confidence, all sorts of things. And that, in this case, we actually measured that too, right? And the participants did report some differences there. And so that's really sort of rewarding, I think, right? To think that, yes, we were able to explore what is a really challenging, difficult subject, that the participants, we were very worried about not doing any harm, right? That we did not want to add to what is already a really traumatic experience, right? And so doing that really carefully forced us to question everything that we were doing, and every piece that we, had done on prior collaborative filmmaking projects, where I would argue we're always really careful, but I felt like this one we were super, super careful. And I think that made it better, right? That I think we, were able to develop relationships and to ensure that we were doing what was best for the participants, because we had such a good relationship with them. So while you were talking, though, I was also thinking about how there were a lot of pieces happening here. It was COVID, right? So we were at home, literally, and trying to figure out how to do this project. And so when I think about the challenges of this project, that it wasn't just that we were like, oh, let's do collaborative filmmaking. It's a very hard topic, all these things, but there was this extra layer of logistics. And so, we figured out how to mail cameras to participants, have a whole protocol for ensuring that the cameras were sanitized before they went on to the next person, right? So we learned a lot there. We learned a lot about, enhancing our trauma-informed approach to all of this. But then the other thing that I was thinking is about the challenge of, you mentioned it's a small sample size, and it's 5 families, right? Like, what did we want to do, right? Like, we were coding the data, we were applying qualitative methods, but like, were we trying to generalize, or what did we want from the project? So I don't know if you could speak just a tiny bit about that.
Yeah, right. Because we call this research, right? This is a research process. Like, we got ethical approval for this as a scientific research study. So on one hand, it's a scientific research study which is meant to contribute to knowledge generation so that we can make, more informed decisions about the care that we provide. On the other hand, we have this small data set that's incredibly rich, that we found, and we started to see that like every family had a unique experience, which is not probably at all surprising, but I think really important for us to even articulate in the scientific literature, that it's hard to do this research, right? Not only because it's, a hard to reach population, it's a small population potentially, but there are also challenges with trying to put people's grief experiences and bereavement experiences in a box or classify it in some way. And so in qualitative research, we're trying to kind of pull out themes and try to find patterns in the data. And actually, we had to take a step back and say, actually, each film is its own pattern. It's its own thing. And so we actually ended up working with a graphic designer, a visual artist, who actually was able to create these individual illustrations, these individual visuals, that we could put in a scientific research paper, but to show that each grief experience is unique, is different. And I think, thankfully, we had the space to really elevate that in this project, instead of saying, 3 people experience grief in this way and 2 experience it in this way. That really was opposite of what we were trying to do. But it took us, we had to move through the process to kind of figure that out, right?
Yeah. And that's what I think when I think about this project, I learned a ton, right? Because it forced us to stop and think at every moment. Stop, think, discuss with each other, with our participants, with our advisory board, and like, what is the right way forward that is supportive of the families and that is going to elevate their experiences. And so really centering it on them. It was the topic made us do that. What we would do anyway, I would like to think, but like really made us stop and do it thoughtfully. So I'm excited that what we have now seems to resonate with other families too.
Right. This advocacy piece. I mean, I think one of the things that I was maybe not surprised by, but I was just kind of blown away by was that, participants in every research study, in my experience, are always amazing. They're dedicated. The fact that they trust us and spend the time to help us really generate something for, the next person who's going to need this intervention, or be it, medication, whatever it is. But in particular, this project, I don't know if you agree, Jesse, I'm sure you do, but like the spirit of the group that came together and supported each other through this process, even through the process of creating their films. I know Cassie was like calling the other moms and supporting, I mean, things that we didn't ask them to do, but they just really went above and beyond to build community throughout the process, which again comes back to this idea that, ooh, maybe we're onto something in terms of, is collaborative filmmaking an intervention? Because it somehow naturally lent itself to discussion, dialogue, community building, even over Zoom, even when we were all remote, which was really incredible, surprising, and amazing for me personally to see.
Yeah. I mean, it was only like the last time we talked a couple weeks ago with the group that I realized that I've never met any of them in person. Like, and that I know them really well, and I like feel like we have a good relationship, but it occurred to me I've never actually met them in person. It's all been via Zoom. And so I think that was an interesting element too, right? Is that maybe that was helpful in some way too, that we were engaging in a space and time where there was a lot of other uncertainty, and this was a good group to get together with. So I think, we glossed over a little bit just in the discussion of what are the sort of steps of concept mapping, that we should probably just reiterate the dissemination piece, or sort of the screening piece, because we've talked about that it can be a research tool, so it can help us understand different context experiences. In this case, what we wanted to just really capture was that the diversity of experiences, and that every grief journey is different. And then it can be an intervention, right? So by engaging in it, it can have a direct impact on the participants. And our experience is that is for the good, right? That they develop with themselves, but then relationships with others, and that it translates into improved outcomes. But then the third piece of concept mapping, geez, that's a whole other topic. The third piece of collaborative filmmaking that we talk about is it as a tool for advocacy and education. So can you share just a little bit about, like, when we did the screening, how did we design it? Who was it with, and what was the sort of feedback?
Yeah, so the screening, obviously one of the most powerful parts, because it's really the culmination of all of the 5 films. So as background, all 5 families agreed to share their films publicly. They didn't have to, but they agreed to that as a part of this final screening. So we were able to work with a professional editor to pull together all of the films, an illustrator to create kind of different pieces to weave the films together, and then also a team of incredible musicians to compose original music. And so we had this final film that we wanted to screen publicly. And it was really through a lot of discussions with our advisory board that we decided to use the already existing platform that Pediatric Palliative Care Coalition had established. called is it Firefly Chats, Jesse? And they've been building this movement around providing resources to families and providers. And it was just an incredible platform that they luckily said, hey, we'll slot you in. We'll advertise the film. We'll invite providers, families, people in our networks. And all of a sudden we had over 500 people registered, groups in hospitals around the country watching the film. I mean, it was incredible. So lots of care providers, people who are interested in pediatric palliative care, obviously. We brought them together over Zoom to hold a screening of the film, but also we had an incredible social worker who helped us navigate a critical discussion about the topic and the themes uncovered in the films after. So all of the families had a chance to share their thoughts about what the project meant to them, share a little bit about their experience. We took audience questions, so you can watch that discussion also on our website here. So that was really just, we were blown away. I think that's the largest audience that we've ever had for a collaborative filmmaking project, but also the largest audience that Pediatric Palliative Care Coalition had seen at any of their events. So obviously there is a great need to continue to discuss this critical topic in grief and bereavement and palliative care. So did I miss anything, Jesse?
No, I was just trying to pull up while you were talking. And we do have feedback. I mean, because we are nerdy academics, right? Like we collect data for everything. So we did ask audience members to provide us with some feedback about their perspectives of the film. And so I was just trying to pull them up. So I found it. So I just have two quotes, and maybe I'll just share them as illustrative of audience response. So one is, I work with grieving families regularly in my job as I work in the ICU, and this film helped me to widen my perspective a bit to think about the families' lives after they leave the hospital. And so that's really powerful that this individual has lived experiences, but this film helped them to process and think about it a little bit differently, right? And so maybe that led to some behavior change on their part, but then certainly increased awareness about the parents' needs. And then another audience member said, the personal stories allowed me to see inside these individual families' experiences, and they showed me that people react differently and have different needs in this situation. So again, just elevating the conversation and dialogue around this a bit more, with the ultimate goal of increasing awareness about the need for palliative care, pediatric palliative care, and then also the need to support families, over time as well. And so I think if you go to the website again, you can see the recording from the panel discussion after the screening, where the filmmakers, the participants, are all sort of talking about what this really means and what would be helpful for them moving forward. So I just wanted to reiterate, right, that it's a method that is useful for research, for intervention, and for advocacy. And increasingly, we're sort of studying them all three together, right? That they are not independent. And I love that this notion that it's doing good in many different ways is really exciting. So I want to ask you, we're about to run out of time, but I want to ask you a couple questions, and then I think you have a couple for me. But so we talk about this project all the time, right? We talk about it to other people. We talk about it with each other. We record ourselves talking about it. But what was one of your favorite experiences working on this project?
Too many to count.
Yeah.
Okay, so just one. I think that my favorite experience was probably, we've been talking about the audience screening. I, again, was just so blown away at not only the audience that came and showed up for a 2-hour session in the middle of a work day. Like, it was that important for them to take the time out. People that are mostly complete strangers to us, and probably to the families, just that outpouring of support was just like a reminder that I was like, this is a powerful project. Like, this is needed. Like, we need to be doing more of this. That to me was just like such a, I don't know, it was just like this light bulb moment for me. And then of course, seeing the families being able to talk about and reflect in real time about their experience, right? Like you mentioned, we collected data from audience members, we collected reactions anonymously from the participants too. Like, we asked them all of these questions, but to see them in real time with each other, that
Yeah.
to me was the best moment. What about for you though? I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I know. I think well, first off, I shouldn't say favorite, right? I mean, I think this is where this project has been so hard because it has been heartbreaking.
Mm,
And so maybe not, I shouldn't have said favorite, but maybe the most powerful, or sort of the thing that you think of a lot, afterwards, because I think a lot about the time that the participants gave to us and the trust that they gave us, that they were willing to sort of trust that this would turn out okay, right? And that only happened because we had amazing partners, right? So
mm,
Betsy and Cassie and others sort of vouching for us and really advocating. But the fact that they would, join us on Zoom, sometimes when they were in their cars, on their way to other things, but they were committed to, learning about the process so that they could then do the films, and that they were willing to talk to us in such a raw and real way. Um, I'm just like, I think I say this all the time, right? But I think every single time I cried, and mostly it was not because I was sad so much as I was just really emotional, right? Like it felt like we were dialed in and to each other and to the topic and like doing something important. And that was really rewarding. So I think it was, by no means easy. It was really hard and it took more time and effort than I think we had anticipated going into it. But it feels like um, I grew a lot from being a part of the project, and a lot of that is because of interacting with everybody who was connected to it. Um, so yeah, I had no idea what, like 3 years ago, 3+ years ago, that we would be on this side of it talking about it this way. Like I had no clue. So I think if I were going to talk about a favorite thing, it would be like the reminder of just to like trust the process and give it a go, right? That like I could have said, no, why are we doing this? This is not an area that I know anything about. Um, but instead we were able to say, no, I think this is a good, this has a promise. Let's give it a go. And yes, it worked. And I learned so much, right? Like personally, it was really rewarding. So like if I were gonna sort of give myself advice back then, right? Like, yes, do it. Like, just do it. Do it in collaboration because you can't do it alone because there's so much that you have to process and you need to support each other and like, more minds are better, right? But yeah, that was a really long-winded answer of like, this project is really special to me. Um, so yeah, where do we go from there, Sarah?
I couldn't agree more. I think we've talked about this so many times, like walking away from like just really incredible conversations with the family is tired, raw, they're tired, we're tired, everyone's just, it's just a lot, right? And wondering, what do we get ourselves into? And then being able to say, one of the most rewarding projects I've ever been a part of. I mean, just so incredible. So I guess on that note, thinking about all of the things that you have learned and knowing that you were able to take this method and apply it to a new topic, like you said, outside of both of our areas of expertise, what would you advise someone who's interested in this method? How would you give them advice in terms of how to how to do it, where to start. What
Yeah.
advice do you have?
Um, yeah, I think, you know, I'm pretty sure that collaborative filmmaking is appropriate for any topic. No, I'm just kidding. I think it has an application in many, many spaces beyond what we could ever imagine. And so my hope is that other people will use it in those spaces, right? That we do want the capacity to use it to grow, because for those very reasons that we talked about, research, intervention and advocacy, and filling gaps in those spaces that can be used through collaborative filmmaking. So I think, yes, it can be done. I think what we learned from this project is it can be done even if it feels hard. And so I think the advice that I have for someone thinking about doing it is to explore the projects that we've done, right? When we've done a range of topics and context and different places, sort of get familiar with what's been done already, and then be creative in how you think you can apply it, right? That there is a solution to it. It may be that you have to tweak it a little bit, but I think there's a way forward. So I guess my advice would be take the structure and then be creative and make it fit for your topic and your context, and to do that in partnership. Because for all of these things, like if I had been charged with just doing it on my own, it wouldn't have happened, right? Like for any of it. But like to think through the pieces and how do you do it and what do you need to be thoughtful about. And I guess the last thing is believe in yourself. It sounds really weird, like I'm a Ted Lasso, advocate or something, but
That Lasso thing.
yeah. But like, if you think that it can work, then go ahead and try it, right? Because it is still a new method. And so there will be naysayers, or there will be people who say that can't be done, or why are you doing it? And so I do think that you have to have sort of a strong backbone and belief in what you're doing. And, and this also sounds super cheesy, but I believe it's true that, you and I are always here to advocate and support people who want to apply it, right? Who, reach out. And that happens a fair degree, where people reach out and say, I think I'm going to do it this way. And we're like, yeah, absolutely. Let's think it through. But it is still a new method, and it's a growing field. So I'm curious what you have as advice for anybody thinking about doing collaborative filmmaking work.
I think you covered it. We're good. I know you have to run to the next meeting, so let's keep it short. I think to your point, just to say that, yes, we have a method, we have a structure, it's meant to be helpful, we have a handbook, because we've done this several times and we've tweaked it and we've added things. So we have a structure, it's great. It's also flexible, which I think is also nice about the method. We've had people who conduct the whole thing in 20 days. And this project, as you see, it took over 2 years. So it really depends on your project, your topic, your experience, what's right for your project. So I think the great thing about this method is that it is flexible, and encourage you to reach out to us if you have collaborative filmmaking ideas, because we always love to support folks that do. So that's all I got.
All right. So we could talk about it forever. Sadly, I've got to go to something else. But I think if people have questions, they can email us. And then I encourage everybody again, to look at the website for additional resources and information about other projects. So thank you, Sarah.